a statement that you can indeed hear us in the question and answer section, and we will get things going again. And now we are joined by everyone. Great. All right. So, so far we're just seeing the NAEA logo screen, but hopefully things will kick in. Do continue to let us know that you can see us or not. Hopefully we'll get there. I'm going to keep talking and we'll kick things off, and I'll keep an eye on the Q&A section to see. Okay, looks like it's live and the sound is much better. Woo, okay, jumping in. Welcome everyone again to take 2 of the Viewfinder Hangout. We are thrilled to launch the first issue of Viewfinder. We invite you to read the articles. They're linked on our Google Plus page so that you can kind of get a better sense of everything that the publication is aiming to do, experimental space for reflection. We are going to jump right into talking to our authors just in the interest of time, but we'll definitely be able to comment and talk more in the articles themselves if you guys want to keep talking. So a reminder to use the Q&A section to ask us questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Emelie to kick us off with our first question for the authors.
Hi, I'm Emelie Jennings. I'm on the editorial board for Viewfinder and the manager of the school programs for the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. And we're going to start really broadly in terms of the experience of our authors this first publication. So to Rachel and Amy, I ask, in what ways have you contributed to the field in the past? And what was your experience writing for Viewfinder?
I can go first if that's all right with you, Rachel. Okay, so you know, Viewfinder was such an amazing experience for me in so many ways because primarily my contributions have been in the form of presentations at conferences like AAM or California Association of Museums or NAEA. And I've done a few blogs for the California Association of Museums, namely in the Western Museum Association. I also run the Facebook page for AAM EdCom, so thanks to all of you who like our posts. And but I haven't really had the opportunity to publish writing before in any capacity, so this was a really good foray into that, especially because Chelsea just really helped me streamline my thoughts and culminate them in a way that I hadn't thought of before. So having the peer review process was so meaningful, even for my own personal growth and my own ability to kind of see where my leadership philosophy was headed.
And I will jump in and kind of echo some of what Amy was just saying, especially about the editing process. Sara was my peer editor, and I think it was a really fruitful and like thoughtful and reflective and rigorous and great editing process. I think in the past, a lot of my ways that I have contributed or am part of these conversations going on is like I have written blog posts and I do a lot of social media, so you know, I feel like I've had conversations with people on Twitter and that sort of thing in a lot of these more informal channels, and then blog posts sort of often in reflection to a specific event. But this was a really nice opportunity to do something that was a little bit more reflective about leadership and vision and kind of larger thoughts about the field for me. And so I think when I started that out, I was also kind of, you know, I think I shared a lot of thoughts, and Sara really helped me kind of organize them. I think it's always great to get somebody who's outside your own head. That's one of the things that I like about peer review. And Sara was really great at helping me kind of organize those thoughts, and I think end up with something that was much more kind of a clear narrative to follow through, and hopefully something that can help people understand where I'm coming from, take what is relevant, but I do think that came out of that review process for me as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. And we're happy to hear that the peer review process was profound, to put it lightly. So in the idea that Viewfinder pulls together thinking around a central theme, we're very curious to hear from both of you. What were some major threads that you found in reading your piece in the context of two other voices?
I think one of the things that really jumped out at me was the way all three of us seem to be referring to a kind of ongoing process and change in leadership, that we're at three kind of different points in our leadership journey, but that everybody in some way or another was talking about, there's Deborah talking about these different styles of leadership that she has experienced over the years, and Amy talking about kind of still wanting to try out new things from Denver and changing things up. And I think for me, I was really thinking about, as one of the things that I'm talking about in that article is the idea of casting a wide net and seeing lots of different ways to inspire leadership. And that was really nice to see kind of paralleled in different ways in all three articles. So that was one resonant piece that I found.
Yeah, and that, we don't land on a fixed style, as you put it in your article, Rachel, and that it's a lifelong process, and Deborah pointed this out too. I think I've gone through life thinking, okay, I need to identify my specific leadership philosophy and stick with it and be unwavering, and really I'm just constantly learning how to be a better leader, a more mindful leader, and to trust my staff and my peers to work together to meet our mutual goals. And Rachel, I really loved what you said about diving into the discomfort of being a leader. I thought, maybe earlier in my career, I thought you become a leader and then you're golden, and it's like, not really. There's so much learning left to do and so much discomfort to wade through, and to embrace that and be mindful about it is really important. And I felt like we all touched on that.
And I will also say that I think that was a really interesting thing to see, especially with Deborah writing about mindfulness practice in leadership, like that idea of, that can be like that paying attention to how you're leading and how your process of leading might change can also be part of your style as a leader as well.
Great. Well, I just want to take a minute to turn to our audience and remind them that we're super excited about incorporating your questions. So be sure to send those to us over the Q&A platform here in a Google Hangout. But as part of the Viewfinder process, it's as much as it is about the authors that we invite or that express interest in wanting to write for us, it's also a collective of those voices in collaboration with the editorial board. So we wanted to open the conversation up just to the full group of thinking that went into this first publication. And so I'd like to hear from everyone. As you achieve greater visibility within your institutions as leaders, what do you think are some particularly essential skills to have as you develop as into that role in your institution? And the kind of inverse of that question, or what are some skills that currently elude you that if you could wake up tomorrow and have them mastered, you would love to have that taken care of? So I open that up to the whole panel here.
I'll jump in. I think something that has been really powerful in terms of both being a leader generally, but also doing this peer review / reflection process with Amy, is that a lot of what Amy wrote about are things that I personally have been thinking about a lot and grappling with and even struggling with. So Amy's article talks about that kind of diving into discomfort and letting go of programs or letting go of certain aspects of what you might hold very dear to your job. But this idea that when you let go and invite others in, invite your staff in, invite fellow colleagues in from the institution, invite others from outside of your institution to work with you and think with you, that it becomes a shared responsibility among all of the collaborators. And I think that is something, I'm going to say that's my answer to both parts of that question, because I think it's a really hard thing to do, but it's also really important and makes our programming and what we offer as museums, as cultural institutions, even stronger for our audiences.
I had a really interesting conversation so after this article was done and I let my boss know that I was writing it and I sent her the version of what I had written, she sort of wrote back and she was like, this is interesting, because she was identifying a lot of things in her work, and she's been in this position for quite some time and is quite experienced. And she was saying, you know, oh, it's funny because a lot of these things that you've written about are also things that I'm still trying to keep in mind as a leader as well. And I feel like that kind of crystallized something for me about this question that I'm struggling with and wrote about a bit, but feeling like what are the skills? You know, it's like that question of like what skills elude you. It's like also just figuring out what skills you're aiming for or what skills you want to have, whether you do have them or whether they're things you need to build. And the idea of continuing to question myself on that is something that I would really like to hold on to. And it's kind of been nice to hear, I mean, then in also reading the other articles and in our discussions with the editorial board and the authors and all of that, that seems to be a real commonality. So I think I don't know if that's like exactly a skill that I have or a skill that eludes me, but it seems to kind of encompass both a little bit.
For me, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Amy.
Okay. So, you know, a skill that I'm really trying to cultivate, and I guess does elude me to some degree, but it's a glimmer on the horizon, is a really full appreciation for the decisions I make and how they influence not just myself, my department, or my corner of the institution, but the institution at large. And that's something I've tried to carry with me throughout my career, and I think can be challenging. You know, you really want to be an advocate for what you are working on, and you definitely should do that. However, sometimes you need to kind of keep the considerations of the institution or the field at large, you know, in the forefront of your mind. And sometimes the decisions you make that are best for the institution might seem to be in conflict with the best decision for your department or your role. And so having that holistic appreciation for what's best for the institution or what's best for art museums I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind. And when the going gets tough and, you know, I'm dealing with a difficult person or situation, you know, I try to think, okay, you know, what am I doing this for? It's for art, it's for community. You know, how does this affect my staff? You know, how does this affect our institution's profile in the community? So that's something I'm working towards.
And I mean, on that note, I will also say, I think another thing that I have been kind of trying to work on in my own career is where is that moment to really find a way to push productively? You know, like where is it helpful to those goals? Because I agree, it's like those are the goals that we want to be at the forefront of what we're doing. And where is the moment to kind of push forward into something that might be uncomfortable or might be new? You know, it's like where's the moment to try something new that might be different, that might be uncomfortable for some people, in a way that is still kind of productive and doesn't, you know, conflict with that idea of the greater goal of the institution that we're working towards. That's also a question that I feel like I'm kind of wrestling with at the moment.
And I think that's a really great point to bring in some of the questions that have been coming up in the Q&A. Just as we are all kind of collectively thinking of our roles individually in our institutions and how it affects not just our staff, but wider colleagues and the field, as you've both been talking about. It may be a good moment to talk a bit about how Viewfinder is trying to serve that role for the field at large and kind of create more space in our area in museum education to have those moments of public reflection and leadership. I think it's clear from what we've all been talking about so far in terms of our personal experiences with leadership or the articles that have been written for this issue, that we're all really thinking about how the act of reflecting and the act of being conscious of our practice is a really valuable one to be a leader. A little bit meta, but I think very true. So I might turn it over to Sara really quickly to talk a bit about how we view Viewfinder as a new space in the kind of publishing opportunities that exist in museum education.
Yeah, thanks. So, well, first of all, that idea of calling it Viewfinder, the name of the project came from that idea of perspectives and helping people to kind of find their own viewpoints and their own angles on these issues that are coming up in our field. And NAEA, as one of the leading organizations for museum educators, and especially art museum educators, has been trying to kind of create a space where we can share our ideas and share what's coming up in the field of museum education. So by having a publishing project, we can all be reflecting really thoughtfully on what we're doing. So we tend to, and I said this a little bit before we had our technical difficulties, but we tend to be in a field that does a lot of work and is very thoughtful, but it's passed down through an oral tradition, that we don't often have the time and the moment to step back and reflect and write, and especially to get feedback then from our peers about the themes that we're writing about. So that's why we chose to work on Viewfinder, of a way to take these big themes and have a number of people write about each of the themes, and that each author is also paired with a reviewer who's from a different place in his or her career, a different generation, if you will, of museum education. So, and as Rachel and Amy both said, that can be a really meaningful process, and I would just echo definitely what Rachel said about the editing process, that both of us were stretched to reconsider our core, understandings and assumptions and values about how and why we do the work that we do. So that moment of taking time to reflect was really important for both of us. And her words come out on the page, and mine are a little bit more in the background, but it was, I would say, as meaningful to me as it was to her. So thank you for that, Rachel. But so what makes Viewfinder a little bit different from some other blogs or other more scholarly journals is that it's fitting into that space in between. So just like a journal, we have a peer review process, but like a blog, it's a pretty quick process. So there's about 2-month turnaround between an author being invited to participate based on their self-identifying as being interested in writing, and the actual publication or going live with the journal. It's really great to have an online publication where we can share, we can comment about the text within the text. Medium is really cool because you don't have to just do a comment at the bottom, but you can actually grapple with the ideas line by line. So I encourage all of you out there to follow that link that I think Michelle posted in the Q&A and go and read the articles and start making notations and adding your thoughts and creating that dialogue with all of us. Some other things that make it a little bit more unique in that space between blogs and journals is that we're inviting all of you to submit your ideas. So we'll talk a little bit more at the end about how you can share a topic that you want to write about. You can share that you are interested in writing, you can be interested in reviewing, or you can be interested just in putting that topic out there for consideration. So this can become kind of a clearinghouse for the way that museum educators are thinking about each topic over time. And hopefully, 20 years from now, we could go back into however we have saved our internet archives and think about, back in 2015, what did leadership mean to us and what will it mean in the future? So those are just some little thoughts now. If anyone else wants to share any thoughts about that too, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually, one of the reasons that I was so excited to participate in Viewfinder, especially in this first issue, was that kind of the quick turnaround process, because I think that's one of the things that, I always kind of question. It's like, I like I come from academia, like I'm used to the academic journal process as well, and there is a certain amount of anticipation of, what is the next quarterly issue going to be, or semi-annual or annual, however often it comes out. But I think that like one thing, so my academic experience is in art history, and all of my museum education experience is kind of practical and on the ground. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about our field, is that there are many people who come in with both the academic background and then have this very practical background as well. And so I like the idea that Viewfinder kind of finds a middle ground with that as well, where it's a quick enough turnaround time that we could use an issue to respond to a very topical question that comes up, or you know, if people wanted to really focus on, like, some things are kind of evergreen and we can always think about these issues. You know, we could go back to leadership over and over and over again, and obviously the philosophies may change, but the topic will still be there. But then some things, you know, like there was like a lot of conversations around, you know, the museum's response to Ferguson and Black Lives Matter movement, and that became very topical. And if you have a long peer review process, then by the time you get to publish anything or share reflections or thoughts about it, it's coming much later. So I was really excited about the idea of doing something that had a kind of quicker turnaround process, and I'm excited to see where that goes with Viewfinder too.
And I think we're really excited, to that point, Rachel, to work in concert with all of these other types of publications, because the beautiful thing is that while it's so important, of course, to respond right away and to respond kind of at the Viewfinder middle point that we're thinking of this as, it's also, of course, really important to think back to it as well, to your point. So I think we really want to view it as another option, and hopefully a way for people to explore the writing process, to explore the peer review process in, as you said, kind of a shorter and maybe less intimidating kind of time frame. But we really view this as something that we hope will be kind of like a value added to the publishing space in our field, rather than something that would replace or be in competition. Totally not our intention. Rather, as we were all talking about, to really add to the space and hopefully create more opportunities that will feed into all sorts of publication types, from blogs to scholarly journals. So we're really excited to kick this off. And of course, to experiment. As we said, one of the big goals of Viewfinder is to be an experimental publication. So while we've got a system now, and we will continue to shape that system and look for feedback from everyone to see how it's working. So we're really excited to kind of live that mission as well in our publishing space. So thank you so much for that question, Michelle. And I think I might turn things over to you, Emelie. Do you have another question? And in the meantime, those of you who are watching, please feel free to add any questions that you have to the Q&A, and we'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump into about how Viewfinder is distinct, and just again underline the rigorous attention that we paid to the intergenerational learning that we're trying to achieve. As Sara so eloquently said, museum education is vastly defined by oral history, and what we're seeing more and more is that with the explosion of museum studies programs, that we're having a robust and just extremely active emerging professional population that's coming into play, and they're just amazing in terms of the resources and energy that they bring. So trying to provide a space to connect that energy with the real stewardship that we need from our senior leadership within the field as well, and try to have that be a cohesive place that we are creating an archive. It's not too much to say that that was part of our intention, and also creating a place for middle management, people such as myself, to think about what do I need to do to be inspiring change at my level, but also to be bolstered by those that have been in the field for a long time, but also pushed by those young ideas that are coming up too. So I think that is another really defining characteristic of what makes Viewfinder unique, and underscores why the title is Viewfinder. It's a space for all of us to find a new view on what we're doing, or to deepen the view that we have and understand where there's corollaries. And in that, we hope that it will be a space for voices to emerge more and possibly be leveraged into more academic journals. And so it's a platform to have more voices join the conversation as well. So that's just my 2 cents on what makes Viewfinder unique. But with that idea of intergenerational learning, I'm going to turn it back to the panel with a new question. And for all of us, looking back, what advice would you give yourself about becoming a leader at the start of your career?
I can start if you.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that really stood out to me, we did a lot of thinking about leadership last year at the pre-conference at NAEA, and one of the things that I really realized as one of those emerging museum educators is that it's my responsibility to cultivate the habits of mind of leadership and to position myself as a person who could lead in order to help others see me as a leader. So thinking about, switching my brain flexibly between really micro details and really macro big picture, or honing my listening skills, those kinds of abilities, and also volunteering for opportunities such as working on Viewfinder or working with NAEA in various capacities or within my own institution in positions that might be considered leadership positions. So even though I don't have, a title that's director or president or, something really high level that yells leadership, I can take on leadership in my own way and kind of signal to those around me that I'm ready for that. So for the younger generation, that's what I would really inspire, urge you to do, is to take on those opportunities yourself. And Rachel, if you want to say something.
Yeah, I would just say, I think this is something that it's like simultaneously advice that I want to give to my younger self, and I want to give it like with an asterisk. So I'll give the advice first, and then I'll get to the footnote of the asterisk. But my advice is it sounds very simple, but like really like have confidence in your ideas and present them, and kind of step up to the plate. Sort of like Sara was just saying, it's like people are not going to hand you all the opportunities that you might be able to go out and get yourself. So don't be eaten up by imposter syndrome, like you have valuable contributions that you can make. That's like what I want to tell my younger self. Now the asterisk comes because I think there is a difference between having confidence in your ideas because you've thought about them and they're really like meaningful and you've talked about them with other people and come to a conclusion that you have something valuable to contribute, and just speaking up all the time and throwing every idea out there, whether or not it's really been thought through. So there's some happy medium in there. I don't think either of those extremes are really the way people behave. But I guess I would say, like, to my younger self that it's sort of like, feel confident in your ideas, but also find people to bounce those ideas off of. Like that it doesn't just have to be you and your individual ideas always, but like that's a way to build relationships with people in the field as well. So feel free to put your own ideas forward and be confident in them, and also seek out people that you respect in the field and brainstorm and bounce ideas around with them and get their opinions.
I'll jump in there too. If I could tell my younger self something, I would just be like, understand that for me, teaching is just so much the core of what I do. I mean, it's no big surprise. I'm the manager of school and teacher programs, so being in the galleries and teaching is, the lifeblood. But I think in my early career, I was like, oh, where it's really going to get exciting is when you get to make decisions about how things are structured. And I think it's really important for those that are emerging to realize you get to make those decisions every day about the groups that you're working with. And so really attending to your own agency within that, and thinking about how does building community within each of the classrooms that you work with help you build the skills to build community when you're developing a program? How does pushing yourself to articulate your tour around a big question help you develop the big thinking skills that you're going to need to be able to leverage when you're talking to funders? Like, this is the question that we're pushing for. How does attending to evaluation data and understanding how people are responding to what you're doing help you begin to be more evaluatively minded when you become a program manager? So from my standpoint, I think I was always really eager to get beyond teaching, which is maybe more honest than I really want to be, but it's the truth. And I think the more that we spend time with really honing what gallery teaching provides for us as practitioners, it will give you a vast well to draw upon once you get into a more administrative position. I'm very aware as I say this that the crux of that problem is that we need to be paying more attention to how gallery teaching is positioned within our field, making sure that it's compensated in such a way that it's allowing emerging professionals to spend the time there and not have it be like actually an imperative to move past it financially. And I also think it's really important to see how, if you're attending to what your gallery teaching is doing, that it inherently pushes you to begin to be more organized and help leverage into supporting a manager. Like for me, I'm really fortunate in that I have a dedicated team of teaching artists that are constantly looking at what kind of organization needs to be put in place for us to achieve our goals. And so that kind of goes back to what Sara was saying about stepping up, like looking for positions that you can actually step up and start to take on some additional leadership by organizing things in a way that is cohesive. So that was my 2 cents. I don't know, Amy, do you want to jump in and talk about your gift to yourself?
Oh gosh, I know. My head is really spinning because there's so many things I would tell my younger self. But definitely resonating with some of the things that have come up with leading from where you are, and like what Rachel was. I think this is kind of what I took from what you were saying, Rachel. Like, it's not that you want to take on every little thing and be proactive on everything, but identify those areas that you feel passionate about, that serve the institution, that serve the field at large, and be proactive rather than reactive. I think Deborah mentioned in her article, and we can all be leaders, and we can all model leadership in our own ways. And kind of hearkening back to what I was saying earlier, I think I had a much more myopic view of what being a leader in museum education was or could be, and so just being open and being self-reflective and constantly seeking out mentorship and with humility, I think I think I could have had more humility when I was younger. So, and one other thing that is a little different than I think what has been discussed is work-life balance. Earlier in our careers, we don't think about it that much, I think. For me, it was much more about doing as much as possible, volunteering for, anything that came up that seemed like a good idea. And I'm so glad I did that because now that I have a little kid, I really have to think a lot more about my work and my home life being separated. And I'm very glad that I threw myself in when I was younger, but I also think to have a mind towards work-life balance is important.
And I'll jump in kind of on that note. All of the things that everyone has said, for sure, but also jumping off that work-life balance, 2 things. One is remembering that we bring ourselves to work and we bring our work home, and that's okay if we let ourselves be okay with it in a healthy way, that we can use our kind of outside interests and passions in our work life, and that we can inspire others who might not be in our field with what happens and the big ideas of being an educator, of being in a cultural institution. And the last thing I would say is to not be afraid to bring those outside passions that seem like they might have absolutely nothing to do with museums into your work because it enriches it. So for me, I'm a huge technology nerd, even though I'm a little bit cursed with Google Hangouts. Other things, I am definitely a huge tech nerd, and it took me a long time to feel comfortable with bringing that to my work life, but once I did, it immediately kind of helped me carve out what I'm passionate about, both in teaching and in administration and management. So I think not being afraid to kind of bring your whole self and in a healthy way, in a healthy work-life balanced way, to your job and vice versa would be my advice.
So I just want to try to muscle in one more question. And again, with this idea of intergenerational learning or exchange, I'm going to push us to think about what do we feel will be essential qualities of upper management leadership within 5 years. I think that that's what I found so compelling about Deborah's piece, was she really is putting us in a mindset to be futuristic in the way that we consider our position in the field. And so I turn that to us as a challenge to try to articulate what do we think will be essential for us to be using and or those that will be in upper management positions in the next 5 years.
May I jump in? So I recently went to a nonprofit management institute at Stanford over the summer, and there was a lot of talk about vulnerability in leadership and how vulnerability is typically considered a feminine trait, but that emerging leaders, especially in the millennial generation, are finding vulnerability to be an asset, not a hindrance. And I think some of us were brought up to push our vulnerability aside and to only, to try to not show emotion. And, I think we do have to try to remain impartial to be good leaders, and we don't want to, bring our dream journals to work or anything like that. But we want to instill confidence in ourselves as leaders amongst our staff. On the other hand, I think it's something for us to start thinking about, how to be more mindful, more vulnerable, more humble in our leadership. And I think that's kind of a hard paradigm to address, but it really resonated with me to hear that. And so that's something I'm going to be thinking a lot about in the future.
And I will just say very quickly, because I know we're coming close to the end of our time, but I think that one thing that has started to be talked about now that I think is going to be really important going forward, especially for leadership to take up, is thinking about some of the systems that our field has put in place that make it hard for people to join it. I think, without going into a lot of that, I think there's wage considerations, there's the kind of schooling that's expected, the kind of unpaid internships that are expected, a lot of the ways that people come into the field. And I think those are systems that are set up so that it's hard for people to come in, like Emelie was saying before, to do that teaching without financially needing to push forward right away into leadership. It's hard to get people who are going to bring in the diversity of ideas that our audiences are bringing in to work in the field. And I feel like that I'm really excited that that conversation is starting now in our field, or has been going on for the last few months or a year. But I really think that that's going to be an important thing for leadership to take up and champion in order to make some of those changes. So.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our authors for grappling with these really deep questions and thinking about where are we all going to be in the future. And just to segue off of what Rachel just said about broadening the spectrum of who's involved in this field, whose voices are we hearing, we want to hear your voice. We want you out there watching this, whether live or in a recording. We want you to contribute to Viewfinder so that we can hear what you think about all of the topics that we're grappling with right now. So when you go to Viewfinder, and there's a link over in the Q&A to Viewfinder, but you can also find it via our social media. And it's, if you search on Medium, you can find it. But one of the articles within the first issue is called Viewfinder: How to Contribute. And if you go there, and maybe Julian, you can put up the picture of what that looks like. If you go into the How to Contribute, there's a spreadsheet, on a public Google spreadsheet that you can use. Thanks, Julian. That you can use to suggest a theme. So we're going to create a word cloud out of the themes that are added to that public open document. So if you have an idea and there's already something similar, just put it again. The more that we have the same idea over and over again, the more that it'll rise to the top. So that's where we'll be drawing the themes for the next issues. So we've already identified that our next issue, which will go live in February, that one's going to be sort of a pre-conference reader. We want to think about design thinking, we want to think about listening, we want to think about transparency. So that's the theme that we're currently starting to think about. And then after that, we'll be taking submissions from the field. So contribute a topic. Then if you want to contribute to write either about design thinking, about transparency, about listening, or about any other topic, please fill out the Google form, and you can see right now on your screen a picture of what that looks like. So you can tell us your name and where you're from, and whether you want to be an author or reviewer. And we're also at that point asking how long you've been in the field so that we can match you with someone from a different generation. Once you've selected author or reviewer, it'll send you to the next page where you'll get to describe sort of an abstract of what you want to write about and what you feel like you have to say about that topic, your expertise on that topic. So if you've always wanted to kind of get your ideas out there, but you've always been intimidated or never had time, or there just wasn't really quite the right outlet, this can be your time. You can write, you can review, you can contribute ideas. There's lots of different ways to get involved. And maybe the first thing to do is just to read the current issue of Viewfinder and start commenting and start talking about the ideas that Rachel, Amy, and Deborah have brought up. So in terms of logistics, how this will actually work, if you're starting to think now, like, yeah, that's a good idea, I want to write for Viewfinder, or I want to review someone else's writing for Viewfinder. You know, I don't have a lot of time or a great writing ability, but I really am interested in this theme, and you want to, you know, submit yourself as a reviewer. Either way, we're going to be looking at the submissions that come in and selecting authors to write about 1,500 to 2,500 words, and we'll be contacting them by December 2nd. So get your submissions in by December 1st. So if you want to write, if you want to review, or if you have a topic, get it in by December 1st. That gives you some time to think about it over the long holiday weekend. And then whoever we selected as an author will have about a month to write, and then a month of the editing process. And then the next issue will go live in early February. So that's kind of what you can expect. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Emelie or to Chelsea or to one of the authors to see, you know, what it was like for them. And we hope that you'll contribute. So that's something to look forward to. I'm also going to give a couple of shout outs to other things that are going on with NAEA right now, so that you might have seen in your inbox that the conference registration is open. So register now for the conference in 2016 in Chicago. And also, if you're a museum educator, please also consider registering for the pre-conference. As I said earlier, the theme is design thinking and transparency, and the conversation wouldn't be complete without your voice in there. So please do so now, because there's limited space, so register ASAP. And then you can also follow what's going on both with Viewfinder and all the other NAEA museum education initiatives on social media. So there's a new Twitter handle. It's at NAEA MuseEd on Twitter, and you can also do the hashtag #IamMuseumEd so that they can find you. And then you can also join the NAEA Museum Education Division group on Facebook. So all of those links are on the Google Plus page, I'm sure. And then stay tuned for the next NAEA Museum Education Google Hangout, which will be in December, and that's going to broaden the topic that we've been discussing today to think about all of the different avenues for publishing that we have as museum educators, and to really go into what are these different projects that are out there, what are the different types of writing that we can think about, and how do they each contribute to the field. So there's a lot to look forward to. It's going to be a really great fall and a great winter, and then we'll see you all in March in Chicago. So unless anyone else has any parting words, I just want to thank you for bearing with us with the technology and for sticking by us. And I really hope that you enjoy this first issue of Viewfinder and that you have a fantastic Veterans Day. So thanks, everybody. And I think that's it.